they really touch on certain symptoms, which if we don't address, we do that at our own peril. And it's very disconcerting to see that although economics is not a perfect science like the natural sciences, but there are certain laws or principles that if you really go smack against them, what do you expect? And we've ignored these for political reasons. Now, one would say, but Bruegel is not a political think tank; it's just a think tank, and they don't go. It's not their remit. It's our remit now to get that political will in order to achieve a better economy and more social, caring society, European society. It's our job from the political. So, which comes back to your question, our electorate wants to see what's behind, what are we going to get back. So it's not a yes or no giving up. Nobody gives up freedoms or sovereignty just in a vacuum. You want to know what you're going to obtain, and you reason it out. If it's better, then you're ready to give up. So it's a question of degree.
So I'm just being told we have now 4 more minutes, which is probably the moment when I open this up to the audience. So if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and make it a question, keep it short. Say whom you're addressing the question to, because we probably don't have time to have everybody answer every single question. The gentleman over there.
Yes, I'm Joel Darvas from Bruegel, and I have a question to Vice President Dombrovskis, which is related to the point raised by Minister Skikluna and also Günther Wolf about this asymmetric adjustment within the Eurozone. If I look at the European semester recommendations in the last 3 years, in 12, 13 and 14, then there was a recommendation for the euro area that a more symmetric adjustment would be desirable. But this recommendation is missing from this year, the European semester recommendation gave for the euro area. So my question is that, first of all, do you think that a more symmetric adjustment would be more desirable? And the second question, if so, then why this recommendation has not been made in the context of the European semester this year? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this question. So, several points here. First, it's something which we outlined also in our communication on completing the EMU, on a follow-up of 5 presidents' reports, that we intend to give euro area recommendations more prominent stance, also advancing them on in time, so that the euro area recommendations can then be reflected also in country-specific recommendations to the euro area member states. That is the first observation. Second, on this, why it's not done so far, because we will only publish annual growth survey later this month, and with this we will start the new European semester, where we'll be able to use this new approach. But then, when discussing euro area fiscal stance or euro area debt developments, for example, it's important to underline that it's not meant to invalidate or undermine Stability and Growth Pact. Member states still have to comply with the Stability and Growth Pact. It's part of the treaty. So it's more like an analytical tool to see what policy directions we should be taking within the Stability and Growth Pact. That's an important clarification. And then on this asymmetry, also if we look, for example, at the macroeconomic imbalances procedure, it's also symmetric. For example, large and sustained current account surpluses are also considered macroeconomic imbalances. That's one of the reasons why We also were doing in-depth review to Germany and also recommending them to stimulate the demand side of the economy, to stimulate the investment in order not to have such a large and such a sustained current account surplus.
Thank you. I think Guntram wanted to jump in on this one.
Yeah, I just wanted to say 2 words on the fiscal issue. I think first of all, this notion that we are ready as a union to sustain transfers cross-border, I think is probably, as you also said, Mr. Schelling, I think is probably wrong. I think ultimately the political support will not be there, and this will cause more difficulties than it solves. Now, having said this, I do think that fiscal policy is, of course, national fiscal policy will have to play a role and will have to be more bindingly coordinated. And I think we need a binding and a symmetric way of coordinating that fiscal policy. Now, of course, when you say this, the first thing I'm worried about is that the Commission sort of has started to become a bit laxer with, perhaps a bit too lax in some cases with the interpretation of rules for countries that have very high debt levels. But at the same time, of course, what we will need is we will need also some form of a binding recommendation that, for example, Germany should spend another 20 billion or so, or raise its deficit to boost investment in Germany to get this sort of symmetric adjustment. And so at the moment, I have the feeling that there's so much non-compliance on all sides that the trust to move forward, the next step, is actually much less there now than it was a few years ago.
Actually, the beginning of your intervention just now segs us very nicely to the question I posed in the beginning about the fiscal transfers that we need. It would be great if we can maybe get the results up again. From what I saw, from what was up earlier, it seems like, Mr. Kazimir, you have to do a little bit more convincing at home here, because the unemployment fund is coming in at a mere 13%. And I don't know, to the Commission, it seems like these limited financial incentives, which was once known as the fiscal capacity or contractual arrangements, are quite popular here. So maybe we'll see some work on that in the near future.